Welcome to Fake Agile and the Project Manager, or as I called it, How to Cut Through the Bull. Why did I call this Fake Agile? Well, I find in many organizations, this is what is actually happening. Teams are stopping their traditional ways of working, breaking rules, and then calling what they're doing Agile. So how do you identify the fake Agile from teams which are still learning new ways of working? This presentation is to help you spot the plastic, the fake Agile activity, to help you cut through the bull. So I'm Jon Ward. I've been involved in projects and programs for over 30 years. I'm a director of beneficial consulting based in London. For the last 18 months, I was director of Agile Transformation at Experian, 600 staff across countries in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Prior to that, I was head of change delivery at JP Morgan Treasury Services based in Chicago. I have experience of running teams of over 100 people with budgets of more than $25 million. I've been involved in Agile since 2007. But I'm still learning. I'm really interested in enterprise agility and what are the changes organizations need to make to become agile. So why are firms starting to choose agile? It's true that agile really is starting to eat the world. Prince 2 Agile was published in 2015 and the PMI Agile Practice Guide was published in September 2017 that year. That year, the Pulse of the Profession report stated that 70% of organizations were using Agile to a greater or lesser extent. And last year, PMI acquired Disciplined Agile and Flex. Both are Agile frameworks and methodologies. So Agile is really eating the world. It's here to stay. I don't think that Agile is really a flavor of the month. Why are organizations choosing Agile? Well, they're seeing a better time to market. They're seeing a focus on the delivery. They're seeing flexible scope, they're seeing better solution quality, they're seeing risk reduction, and they're seeing status clarity. So time to market. In Experian, I managed to halve the time for quite complex projects delivering into banking customers. This meant that they were able to get their return on investment a lot earlier. And customers didn't understand exactly what they want. The Agile approach allows them to be flexible about the scope so they can see what they've got so far and then change their mind and add things in and change it all within cost and scope as cost and timeline envelopes. Solution quality, because we do design, build, test in every sprint, and then we test again in the next sprint, and then we test again. The rigor of quality control in the Agile environment is much greater than the traditional test at the end approach. Risk reduction is there because of the improved quality, the focus on value, the reduced time, and the fact that every 3 weeks we get the status check of where the project is. It doesn't mean a status report, although some organizations produce that. This is the team actually saying, here's what we've produced, and it allows stakeholders to review what they've produced and see what is real, and then take corrective action if it's needed. The first thing to say to you is that Agile is a journey. It doesn't happen overnight, which is why I said on my very first slide that the team could be still learning, and that could be reason why you're not seeing all the features of Agile that you would expect. It takes a long time. Agile is a dish of many spices. It's very difficult to define. You can't say this is Agile or this is not Agile. It's a variety of tools and techniques which each organization pulls together in order to deliver a process that allows them to produce projects faster and using the Agile mentality and so on. It's more than just a daily stand-up. There are changes in the way that projects estimate. There are changes in the way in which they undertake quality control. There are changes in the way in which they do their testing. There's a changing in the way in which their roles and responsibilities. So it's more than just doing a daily stand-up around a Kanban board. The fact is, Agile is simple in theory, but very difficult in practice. You can get a team and train a team very quickly with some of the Agile techniques, a couple of hours, and they will have got it. But actually, when they're actually changing their behavior and the way they do things, that's what takes the time. It's a myth that Agile means no discipline. In many ways, Agile has more rigor than waterfall activities. It's just that the disciplines are very different. It's the absence of these disciplines which allows us to spot fake Agile teams. So I'm going to tell you what to look out for. The first thing to say to you is there is a clue that they say, we're Agile, we don't have a plan. It's true that you won't see a 200-line Gantt chart. Agile uses a product breakdown structure instead of a work breakdown structure. So you should start to see the features of an Agile plan, or sorry, the features of a solution in an Agile plan and how they can actually be and when they're planned to be delivered. The Agile plan should be it's called a roadmap or a release plan, and an Agile team will flex this plan. It's not baselined, and they should lay out their intent like this example. So you can see on team one, we've got a feature there that is process customer order, which they're going to take three-week sprints in order to produce. You can see that the epics and the stories are all attached to that feature. This is a program, so we've got 3 teams working simultaneously, and they're working on different features. On larger activities, the release plan has to be synchronized across the teams to allow for continuous integration. If you don't do that, you don't get the quality control that you want from Agile processes. So you can see that all 3 teams have the same sprint duration. They will have coordinated their activities in something called Big Room or PI planning. So you should be able to see a plan. And this could be as simple as a number of post-its on a wall or a whiteboard. If the team can't show you a plan, then it's probably fake. The next area that I'd like to look at is without controls. All types of Agile use metrics as a control basis. Terms you'll hear like velocity, cycle time, lead time, and technical debt are all based on metrics. You should be able to see or create a burn down or burn up chart like the one I'm showing you now. This is a burn up. You can see on the left hand side you've got the measures of value or effort, or it could be story points. Across the bottom you've got the weeks, the sprints, and what you've got here is actually that you can see the burn up going through to completion at the end of the project there. The team should use several of these charts. The progress of the sprint will be shown, the progress of the release, or the progress of the project. It's all mapping done against value, against what the target is. A team should use several levels. Typically, these charts come straight out of an Agile tool such as Jira, and you should be able to ask a Scrum Master what their planned and current velocity is. They should be able to give you an immediate answer, just in the same way as if you ask a project manager what their next milestone date is. They should have this at the front of their mind. If they can't give you an answer about what their current velocity and what their planned velocity is, then it's probably fake Agile. An Agile team should have a consistent process. It's true that they do continuous improvement, but let's start by looking at Scrum. Scrum is, if you like, probably the #1 Agile control technique that's used. And it starts with a team looking at their backlog and deciding how long they need to produce something of value. Whether it's implemented or not doesn't really matter, but they need to work out how much work they can do in a time box known as a sprint. Typically, a sprint is 2-3 weeks long, and if it's more than 5 weeks long, they're probably not using Scrum. The backlog, which is, if you like, the shopping list of what actually is the list of requirements that's going to be produced by the team, the backlog is refined at each sprint by the product owner. This is the Agile scope control. Work is prioritized and made explicit in the backlog. It could be physical, post-its on a wallboard, or it could be the backlog could be in a tool. Each day, the team has a coordination meeting or scrum or stand-up. Typically, they talk to activities progressing on a task board or Kanban board. At the beginning of the sprint, they hold what's something called a sprint planning meeting. And this is where the requirements are explained by the product owner and the team estimates in story points or effort. Agile uses top-down estimation rather than bottom-up, which you're probably used to. At the end of the sprint, there are 2 further meetings. The sprint review, which looks at outputs, metrics, and risk, and the sprint retrospective, which is a performance improvement meeting. So let's look at these meetings in terms of priority. What's their importance? The #1 important is the backlog refinement meeting. This is basically the meeting that establishes what the team has to produce. The next one in terms of importance is the retrospective. The retrospective is where the team looks at their productivity and decides how they can get better. The next important meeting is the sprint review. The sprint review is where they share outputs with stakeholders, they look at their quality metrics, they look at their delivery metrics, and they look at risks, and they talk about the future direction for the development of the solution. The next one, importance, is sprint planning. Sprint planning is where the team decides how much work they're going to produce in a certain time box. They do their estimation. The lowest importance is the daily scrum. That's a coordination meeting, and it's a conversation between the team players to identify any constraints or blockers. So what I'm saying to you is these 5 meetings are the essence of Scrum. If the team is only doing a daily stand-up, then it's probably fake agile. Let's look at Kanban, because if teams are not using Scrum, an agile team is probably using Kanban. And it's the second agile control mechanism. And in fact, some teams use a combination of both. Kanban is a process control tool. It comes from Toyota. It is about moving cards representing work in columns from left, activity needed, to right, activity completed. Kanban has 4 steps: backlog refinement, replenishment and commit, which is a bi-weekly or weekly meeting, and that's where they decide what's going to get worked on and when. There is a daily stand-up with a Kanban team, and they tend to, but the thing about a Kanban team is, whereas a Scrum team tend to work on anything, Kanban teams tend to retain their specialities. So you will have BAs doing business analysis, you will have testers doing testing, and those disciplines tend to reflect the columns that are on the Kanban board. The last meeting is the service or strategy review meeting. This meeting provides the direction and looks at the performance improvement of the team. Again, what the team here is looking at is how can they increase their productivity. The thing that you should know here, and that is the bottom of the slide here, it is a Kanban team delivers continuously. It's not in sprints. It's not in time boxed. It's continuous delivery, and that has a big impact on the project manager. The Kanban activities were ranked by importance. Again, backlog refinement is the number 1. This is where the scope control is. This is where you're deciding the team needs to understand what needs to be done. This is where all the work is actually established and estimated and so on. The next important one is the service review meeting, which provides the direction and looks at how can they improve their performance. The replenishment and commit meeting is where they actually decide what's going to get done when and the sequencing. Prioritization and dependencies are very real in Kanban. The last in terms of priority is actually the daily stand-up. The point that I'm making here is that Scrum or Kanban, what you should be able to see is a consistent process that the team is applying. You should be able to see that they're attempting through the review meetings and through the retrospective, they should be able to see them attempting to do continuous improvement. If you can't see this, then you've probably got fake agile. The whole point of agile is to make and deliver commitments to customers. So at the beginning, a new team will probably have a volatile performance. The Deming cycle, plan, do, check, adjust, should mean that the performance should stabilize after 3 or 4 sprints, and commitments should then start to be met. It's this meeting of the commitments which is important that you should actually see. You should see the teams focusing in on are they meeting their commitments. It's not an excuse just to overrun. They need to be looking at their commitments in terms of their mental commitment to the objectives that they've set themselves. I'd like to introduce you to another agile myth. There are no projects, only products. Well, actually, in fact, most organizations will have both. GDPR, for example, would have been a project in many organizations. A mobile banking application, which is going to be continuously improved, would obviously be a product. The commitments made are the same to the organization from the team, whether it's a product or a project. The difference between the two is probably in the governance. If a team is unwilling to make commitments or continuously fails to deliver on those commitments, it's probably in fake agile. The last area which I'd like to do is unpredictable performance. What do I mean by unpredictable performance? They build the wrong thing. That means that they're not doing their review meetings properly, or that their stakeholders aren't engaging with the review meetings properly. They are subject of large corrective actions. Those corrective actions set back the delivery dates. They set back the team on their haunches. They should be looking at a continuous improvement model. You could see that they've got quality metrics illustrating a poor build. You should be able to see a trend, like the Tuckman model illustrated by the roadmap. Initially, when a team starts with Agile, the performance usually falls. They tend to have to learn new working methods. They tend to have to work together as a team, and they start to understand what they're doing and how they're doing it. They're getting used to stories, not functional spec. And what you'll see is that performance will actually fall at the beginning. However, then they will start to make significant productivity gains. By significant productivity gains, we halve the time for duration of projects in experience. So there is substantial productivity gains that you should see. Then what happens is the team gets very cocky, if you like, or very proud of itself, and they start to overcommit. And then what you'll see then is once they start to commit, then their predictable performance falls away, and they start to learn and start to adjust their overcommitments, and then you should see performance predictably improve. If you're not seeing predictable improvement, if you're not seeing predictable performance, then you're probably working with a team that's using Fake Agile. So if a team is using Agile properly, there will be an impact on the project manager. The product owner is the individual that's responsible for managing the backlog. If you like, they're the requirements specialist. But they also prioritize the work, and they ensure that the team understand what is required. So in sequencing the work, the product owner working with the team creates the plan. The Scrum Master is sometimes seen mistakenly in many organizations as a replacement for the project manager. This is a fallacy. The Scrum Master is a coach that is responsible for the team productivity. They do this by helping everybody understand the working methods, the Scrum theory, the rules, and the values. They're an inward-facing role, and they don't look outside of the team. The team members are the ones that actually do the work. So if you summarize, what's the impact of the project manager? Scope control is no longer responsibility of the project manager, it sits with the product owner. The creation of the plan is no longer responsibility of the project manager, it sits with the team and the product owner. And if you're working with an Agile team as a project manager, you've really got to let them produce their plan, because if you don't, then you won't get the commitments that you look for in terms of their commitment to delivery, and you won't have some of the Agile values that we've been talking about. Quality is the collective responsibility of the team. So everybody is responsible for quality. The team typically test the solution in the sprint. And what they do is quite many teams look at automated testing as the means of doing that. The Scrum Master, as I said, is inward facing to the team. So what does that leave with the project manager? What activities does the project manager need to do? Well, you'll notice nobody's managing stakeholders, apart from in that sprint review meeting. Nobody's doing change readiness, benefits realizations, and escalations. All of these roles tend to sit with the project manager. Let's look at Kanban. Kanban doesn't have any pre-described roles. They don't say, like Scrum, you've got to have a Scrum Master and a product owner. But generally what happens is that teams do tend to, if you like, polarize and come in. There tends to be three generic roles. The first one is the service request manager. And those tend to have similar functions to the product owner in Scrum. And they are responsible for clarifying and prioritizing the work items. The service request manager does have some degree of stakeholder management in there, which you need to be aware of. The service delivery manager is a role that's dedicated to improving the efficiency of the workflow. Remember, I said that Kanban is a workflow tool. It's a tool to be used to actually increase productivity by controlling the flow of work. It's also therefore known as the flow manager. It's not meant to be an equivalent to the Scrum Master, although they do have some similarities, but they will be using things like cycle time and lead time in order to improve the productivity of the team. Team members in Kanban are all responsible for delivering their own items of work. So what's the impact of Kanban on the project manager? Kanban itself has less impact in terms of roles and responsibility, but more impact in terms of the delivery process. The team own the workflow and monitor lead times and cycle times. The workflow may have separate functions like quality, testing, business analysis, and so on. However, Kanban is a delivery process, and this has huge impact on things like dependencies, project planning, and control. Remember, what you've got here is Kanban is a process, a continuous delivery process. So it doesn't get well suited to having, project milestones and stage gates and all of that sort of stuff. So there's a big impact on the project manager from Kanban. So in order to help you, I've given you some examples of fake Agile, some pointers if you like. I have prepared a checklist for you as a reminder of this presentation. What I've done is a yes/no answer. And what we've got there is some backlog basics about stability of the backlog and so on. What you don't want is a team where the backlog is constantly changing because the customers can't make their mind up, because that doesn't allow them to do some predictability. So I've given you some other symptoms in this backlog that might be things that might be causing the team to drop off performance and appear to be fake and so on. And you might need to look outside the team as to what the cause of those behaviors are within the team. I've done some team basics about the roles and responsibilities. I've done some things about planning basics. There are things like they use referential estimating and things like this in the Agile world that are new for you. And they're doing a top-down approach, breaking down features and so on into breaking down a solution into features rather than estimating tasks and roll them up into projects. So it's a different estimation approach, and there's a different planning basics. I've gone through what the Scrum basics are, and I've looked at the sprint review and how does that work and so on. One of the things I would say to you is go and have a look at the sprint review meeting and see if they're doing more than just a demonstration. If they're just doing a demo, then they're probably not working with Agile properly. They should give you metrics and risks and where they are and what their plans are and all that sort of stuff. I wouldn't suggest you look at the retrospective, but you should allow the team to do that. But I'd certainly look at the outputs of the retrospective with an idea of saying, is this team actually taking seriously their role in improving productivity? Got some basic guidelines about Kanban. Bear in mind that some teams, and quite a lot of teams, mix Scrum and Kanban. You hear that called Scrum ban. And the difference is what they are doing on their task board is that they will put work in progress limits from the Kanban onto a Scrum task board. There's some stuff in there about quality basics. And then there's some things about large scale teams. When you hear the term Agile at scale is not about an organization. Agile at scale is actually the equivalent of program management. And so therefore you should see larger team activities being worked in the safe mode or less or whatever in terms of the approach that they're taking. Large teams need to be looked at fairly carefully because organizations tend to be very good at project management, but less mature in the program management space. And large Agile teams is definitely a program management discipline. I wrote a book, which before COVID was supposed to be published mid-year, which now who knows when it's going to get published, but it's called the Agile Coaches Cookbook, and the materials in this checklist are actually taken from my book. So just giving you the generalizations, and I've made quite a few generalizations. However, not all teams are the same. So we do have different behaviors based on different teams at different functions in the organization. At the big picture level, we've got program teams, and they plan and manage a portfolio of work. They will be prioritizing activities which typically are in competition, and they will typically use something known as cost of delay. And they will be planning out the work. They tend to use a rolling cycle of planning, and they will be planning out work that needs to get done across an organization. The next level is the program team. The program team use Agile at scale. It's program management. And here the key issue is actually the synchronization of the teams, the continuous integration of the products that are being produced by 3 or more teams. All of them get bolted together at the end of each sprint, and the management, therefore, of quality. Feature teams are Scrum teams, single Scrum teams, or single Kanban teams, which produce features for customers. They use Scrum or Kanban and sometimes both. Component teams produce components for a feature team to consume. So again, they use Scrum or Kanban. So typically, Scrum is used by component teams or feature teams. They're not normally used by program teams and portfolio teams. Kanban, on the other hand, can be used at any of the teams, but it is exclusively used by program teams and portfolio teams. So looking at the types of controls you can see, metrics don't give the answers, they let you ask better questions. I reckon that's a great saying. So what you can't do is take a single metric and decide what's happening. It won't tell you anything. What they are is you need to take a combination of metrics to be able to understand what's actually happening within your team. So for example, a metric might show that your team is delivering solutions faster. However, if you combine that with an escape metrics defect, it could show that taking the two together, that they're cutting corners and paying insufficient attention to the quality. You should remember that plan, do, check, adjust, the Deming cycle, is the cornerstone of all the Agile practices. The metrics that they use in the Agile teams are part of the check activities. Many metrics are applicable to all types of teams. In this slide, I've tried to illustrate some of the key sources of data. For example, I've said that component teams use velocity, cycle time, and lead time, and portfolio teams use business value. However, the component team may use business value to prioritize its backlog. As I said earlier, Agile is a dish with many spices. Program teams tend to look at customer satisfaction. They tend to be able to look at the features delivered, the features blocked. Portfolio teams obviously want to know about the business value delivered. This is especially important where you've got continuous delivery from a large team that's doing continuous, that's using a Kanban type process. Because what you want to do is to track and monitor the business value that's been delivered for the cost of that team. So I guess in terms of fake Agile, you can refer to my mantra. Fake Agile, my mantra is Agile without metrics is anarchy. Agile without quality is pointless. I think the metrics are the key thing to get to fake Agile. It may be what's happening is the team don't quite understand how to use the metrics. Don't necessarily damn a team straight away because they're not using metrics, but they certainly should be trying to attempt to use the metrics. On the quality side, they should be seeing the team really struggling and really taking responsibility with how do they improve their quality of their outputs. This is a space where some organizations have to bite the bullet and really to get Agile teams delivering high quality solutions, they need to invest in some degree of automated testing. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. We've got a checklist that you can actually download at the end of the presentation. What we've got here is some contact details. Feel free to reach out. I'm really happy to talk to your time and help you in any of the questions that you've got.